Hello and welcome. I have one, thank you. I look so pitiful. I've got my walker and my bloody nose. But really, I'm a reasonably healthy human being. Things just happen. Oops. Sorry. Welcome. Welcome to the third Science Uncorked. This topic is all about the watershed resilience. I want to start off with an apology. We were doing the draft slides as always up till, the night before. And then we sent them to a graphics person to make them look pretty. And our graphics person didn't know about all the organizations involved. So they only put our logo on there. But this particular topic comes about because we received a grant from the Resource Conservation District of Monterey County. And we have been working in collaboration with the Fire Safe Council of Monterey County. Sorry. I think my brains are coming out. And so we should have those logos up here as well, and we don't. But we've been doing this work, and we each have our areas of focus. The Monterey Fire Safe Council obviously focuses much more on the traditional fire stuff, and we have focused more on the watershed-wide resilience. So that's what you'll be seeing here tonight, and we'll be working more with them on the larger educational materials as we go on. So I'm really excited I do want to put out a call for volunteers. If any of you have ever wanted to see, what's the name of the ranch, Scott? Cahoon Ranch, up at the top of Carmel Valley. We have a volunteer table up there on Saturday from 8:30 to 2, handing out water to the bikers. And we are short a few bodies. So if you want to go hang out with a really beautiful spot and hand out water bottles to bikers, let me know. We would be super happy to have you here. On your tables, we have just put together some watershed maps, which are super helpful. If you would like to take one home with you, come see me afterwards. Think I'm good? Come see me afterwards, and I have some for you. You'll also see cards that are a little bit about the Carmel River watershed. I am super excited to introduce to you our speaker tonight. She's someone I worked with when I was up at the Russian River. And she has a PhD in ecology and is also a fire survivor of the big Sonoma fire. So has been deeply involved in both watershed ecology and fire. And so has been a great cross-section for this particular piece. So Dr. Wendy Trowbridge, take it away.
Hi, well, welcome, and I'm glad that you guys came out on this beautiful evening. So I just wanted to start off by talking about why we're here, both why we're here today in this place, but also why we live in this lovely valley that is Carmel Valley, because let's face it, we could all just move someplace else and it would be a whole lot cheaper. What is it about this valley that makes us want to pay a premium to live here? And for some people, maybe it's hiking, and maybe it's the wineries, or walking on the beach, or playing golf, or maybe fishing in the river. So we all have our why, and I feel like that's a really important thing to think about, and also to try and protect, because there's a lot of things going on now with all the wildfires here in LA and flooding. And so I'll move to the next slide. So there's some problems that threaten the very reason why we love it. We all love it here, whatever that reason is. And they go from wildfire to water scarcity, climate change. So from flooding to sea level rise, to more frequent droughts, to rising temperatures, invasive species, riparian degradation. So this is a long list. And throughout the course of my talk, I hope that I can convince you that all of these things are related to each other, and they all relate to this map over here, which is a map of the Carmel River watershed. And so it starts out, the Carmel River starts out up here in the national forests, up in the Santa Lucia Mountains, and then flows down through Carmel Valley and also up here in the Salinas Mountains. And so a watershed is a system or a machine that moves water and sediments from one place to another. And it shapes the land and brings together all of these problems that we are facing, and the solutions that we need to come to need to incorporate this idea of the watershed and how these problems are all related. So starting with wildfire, certainly there have been wildfires here recently. There are wildfires up in the North Bay, but also in Altadena. And I feel like one thing that we've all learned is they don't just stay still in one area. So no matter how well you take care of your house and do your home hardening or do your defensible space, if your entire neighborhood is on fire, it's not going to do any good. So we need a larger watershed context. We need to protect not just our homes, but our whole watershed from fire, because the fires that burned in from this direction and from that direction. And so the one thing, there are three main things that influence the spread of wildfire: topography, weather, so winds, and vegetation. And those things are all governed by the shape of the watershed and how water moves through this area. So this is just a map. All these lines are lines of equal amounts of rain. So up here at the top, it rains an average of 55 inches a year. That is more rain than is in Portland, than it rains in Portland, Oregon. And down here at the bottom, down here in Salinas, it rains more like 10 to 12 inches, which is less rain than they get in Los Angeles. So within this amazing watershed where we live, it combines a temperate rainforest with a desert. And the cool thing about the watershed is we neither have either of those extremes, because the water is all evened out. Water from up here where it rains a ton flows down and makes this area wetter, and the groundwater here is fed by all this rain up there. So it moves the water around and evens it out. So there's been for 30 years, Carmel Valley has struggled with water scarcity. And yet every year water falls from the sky for free. And a lot of water falls from the sky. So what we have is a problem not just of not enough water, but of sometimes there's too much water, right? And in California, as you know, in California, there's no such thing as an average rainfall year. It's either a ton of rain or hardly any rain at all. So some years you get flooding, and this is from 1995, and that's from 2023. And so part of what I think we need to do is change our mindset around water and how we can store water, because as sure as there will be flooding, it will be followed by a drought. And during that drought, we're going to need to, this is the Carmel River. in 2014 up stream of the Los Padres Dam. So, and it is completely dry. And so in times like this, we need our bank account. And what is our bank account? Our bank account is groundwater. And so if in those flooding years, we've saved water in the grounds so that we can pump it later in a drought, then we'll have water in the drought to use, and not just for drinking water, but also for the trees to grow and remain and keep moisture in the vegetation. And so, but if on the other hand, we just go crazy and pump groundwater all the time, wet years, dry years, we're using all the water all the time, then when the drought comes, we'll have no bank account. There's no savings to draw on later. And so part of what we need to do is start thinking about water in a different way. Not thinking about trying to get rid of it in the winter, thinking about how can I hold on to it and how can I save it, not just in a dam, but at my house. How can I save it for when I'm going to need it later, when the inevitable drought is going to come? And so invasive species, also, this is just a smattering of the invasive species that are in our lovely watershed. I picked these particular ones because they're all would be considered ladder fuels. So they're all sort of woody, shrubby plants that grow really densely and can move fire from the ground up into the canopy of the trees. And so the native vegetation around here was exposed to prescribed fire for tens of thousands of years and is used to a fire regime that had fire coming through pretty often. But the invasive species, some of them have a different plan about fire. So like French broom will just, burn everything, and that's part of its strategy. And then it comes up in after the fire, there's like a bazillion teeny tiny little seeds of it everywhere. And so we also need to be thinking about how these invasive species interact with not just the water, but also with fire, and how this whole system works together. And finally, these amazing riparian areas that we have here along all of our creeks, they provide shade and keep the water cool so the salmon can migrate upstream in the fall, and they filter the water. They filter the water that runs off the slopes and into the creeks to keep the water clean and clear. But they can also be degraded, and they can also have invasive species in them. And then the Cal State Monterey Bay has done an experiment that showed that riparian areas can function as fuel breaks. They are less likely, they burn with less severity than the surrounding vegetation, but they can also burn with higher severity. They can also pull fire up the hill because of the fire moves with topography. And so we need to make sure that our riparian areas are healthy and safe so they can continue to filter and shade. And for example, if you build the deck out into the riparian area, that's the same, you're putting fuel into the riparian area. And so we need to think about how the whole system is working. And so here's back to another map of the vegetation. The background in this particular map is vegetation. So the yellowish over here is sort of oak woodland and grasslands. And up here, it's more densely forested, as anyone who's driven around the watershed would know. But I sort of divided it into these 4 different areas. So down by the river mouth, it rains an average of 18 inches a year. It's sort of urban, but this is where the main impacts of flooding happen, because all that water from the upper watershed is concentrated down here at the river mouth. And then the Santa Lucia Mountains, this particular area averages 44 inches of rain. again, that is about the amount of rain that they get in Portland every year. So that's a that's a lot of rain. And they have sort of oak forest and mixed conifer forest, and all that rain can really bring on a lot of vegetation, which can lead to more fire hazard. And over, as anyone who's driven up the Carmel River Valley knows, it sort of switches over into more rangeland, grassland habitat over here, and that is less. There's less fuel to start a fire. So then when you exchange that map that we were looking at before, this is the CAL FIRE severity hazard map. They just redid it. It's a little bit confusing because CAL FIRE only cares about the areas where they're responsible for, and they're not responsible for this federal land up here. And so anyway, this is all the state responsibility area, but one of the things to, and red is the most fire danger, and orange is in between, and yellow is less so. So you can see this area over here that's forested, gets a lot of rain. That's a high fire hazard area. And so that's the kind of area where you want a shaded fuel break. You want to clear the under vegetation. And then over here, it's the fire danger is less severe because you have more sort of fine fuels. So let's see. Okay, and I just want to like go through. This is just sort of a quick tour of the watershed. I know this is something that you guys all who live here sort of obviously know, but there's different, in each different area, there's, because of the difference in rainfall and the difference in vegetation, you get different both challenges and opportunities. And I'm not going to like go through and read the whole slide, but the point is, you know, down here at the bottom of the watershed, you're looking at flooding, you're looking at sea level rise, you're looking at, you know, creating wetlands and riparian areas to sort of absorb the water. And over in the Salinas Mountains, this looks very, the landscape looks very different. And you can use conservation grazing to control the fine fuels. And there's different endangered species in this area. You have the red-legged frog and the California tiger salamander, and this still not into this area. But what there's more, most of the steelhead are spawning up in the Santa Lucia Mountains. And so again, this is the more, you can see it's much more forested over in this area. And so what you want to do from a fire perspective would be different in each one of these different areas of the watershed. All right. So now I want to talk about, so I've been talking about, you know, problems and gloom and doom and what are we going to do? And so now I want to move more towards solutions. And I feel like there's sort of two scales of solution. One is what can I personally do to make my house and my land safer? And then there's a larger scale. What can we do as a watershed to make our neighborhoods and our watershed more resistant to fire and more resilient when fires do happen? And so some of the individual scale things are like home hardening and defensible space and rainwater harvest, and the community scale solutions are more, you know, work with your neighbors to create a firewise council. And so I'm just going to go through some of them. So I feel like home hardening is, if we're going to start with your home and sort of spiral out to a larger community, the place to start is really home hardening. And I think we hear a lot about home hardening, and at least before I lost my house in fire, what I thought when people said home hardening was like, you need a new roof. And I was like, yeah, well, if I could afford a new roof, I would put a new roof on. But I'm here to say that that's not actually what just what they're talking about. Sure, if you already need a new roof, put on a new roof that's more fire resistant. But this is from the CAL FIRE page. And yeah, so this one, it talks about, maybe having less flammable material up against your house, but it's also like sweep the debris off your deck. And this one is like clean your gutters, and some of these are about like soffits. And so there's some of the home hardening stuff is big and expensive and it's a commitment, but some of it is like DIY projects you can do on a weekend. And so I feel like if we could concentrate on like the easy things that you can really pick up, cleaning your gutters is huge because, any debris in your gutter then, can catch your roof on fire. So home hardening, and then I feel like defensible space is another one. And so, these are, I feel like we all hear all these things around time and again. And to me, it's more about just thinking about the big picture. Where do I live? Like, do I want to what kind of environment am I looking to create around my house? Is it going to be a shaded fuel break, or is it going to be a grassland? Where do I live? Like, do I live down at the mouth, and do I have lawn? Like, I feel like there's a lot of different possibilities, and there's a lot of information out there, but clearly once you've dealt with your home hardening stuff, the next step is to think about defensible space and think about defensible space with your neighbors. And then rainwater harvest. So I feel like rainwater harvest is something that people talked about maybe 10, 20 years ago and then completely dismissed. So I just wanted to like run down some of the like statistics on it. People in Hawaii, people in Phoenix, people in Tucson are really doing a lot of rainwater capture, and it's sort of offsetting the amount of water that they need to use. So I just put some basic numbers out here. So the rainfall in the Carmel River Valley is between 17 and 15 inches. The average home size in Monterey County is 2,000 square feet. The average Monterey resident uses 58 gallons of water a day. And so if you multiply that all together and through the magic of math, that means depending on where your house is, you could catch between 21,000 and 68,000 gallons of water on your roof, which would, over the course of the year, be between 58 gallons and 188 gallons a day. So do you need to catch all your rainwater off your roof? No, you don't. But could you? You definitely could. And could we think about doing more and maybe using it for our landscape? And instead of you putting drinking water on our landscape, could we catch some rainwater and put rainwater? We could. And so I feel like just thinking a little differently, there's opportunities to do other things. And if you could catch that much, you could catch 68,000 gallons on just the roof of your house. Imagine how much water you could catch on the roof of the high school. Would that be enough to water the ball fields? I feel like it would be. And so I feel like we, as a community, the more we start to think about how we could think about water differently, like, do we need to, I feel like we spend a lot of time in the wintertime trying to get water away from our houses, make sure the gutter flows out into the streets and not up against your foundation. And I feel like there's a lot of worry about how to get rid of the water in the wintertime. And then come the summer, it's like, oh wait, where did all that water go? So I feel like part of it is just a mindset change. Like, could we think about the way we use water differently? And so now we're sort of spiraling out from what you can do in your house to what you can do in your neighborhood. And so there's a Firewise Communities initiative through CAL FIRE, which are neighbors working together to make their neighborhoods safer. And this is just a map. I don't expect you to be able to see your neighborhood on this map from back there. But the point of this map is that there's a lot of them out there and that you could join one. And that if there isn't one in your neighborhood, maybe you could work with your neighbors to create one and work together, because as I said before, like if your neighborhood isn't safe, then your house isn't really safe either. There was a study in after the campfire up in Paradise, looking at like trying to figure out, there's always houses that survive. Like, why did this house burn and that house survive? And they figured out that all the houses that were built before the new code, the new fire code, burned. And 50% of the ones that were built after the new fire code burned. So to me, that says if you work hard and do all your home hardening, then you've got a 50-50 chance. Which is
the old fire code was better than the new.
No, the new one's better.
Oh,
Sorry,
it was
I mustn't.
okay.
The new one is much better.
What
And
year?
all of,
What year are you talking about? What fire code year?
I think it was the early 2000s. Yeah, 2003 maybe. Yeah. And so, it's all the like, you need to have fire sprinklers in your house. You need to like have all these different soffits. And there's a whole, all right, we'll just go to the next slide. There's just a whole list of code changes that are basically all the home hardening things that they wanted to do. So, anyway, the point of that was like, let's work with our neighbors and find a way to make sure that like, if your neighbor's house isn't on fire, there's a good chance that yours won't be on fire. And then I just wanted to end on back to the same slide, why we care. Like, we're all here because we love this area and we want to protect it and we don't want it to burn. So, yeah. So you have any questions?
We happily have Richard and Pam and Jennifer here from the Fire Safe Council to address questions on things like home hardening and things like that. And if you have any questions, I think some of the issues about how keeping your ground spongy and keeping your groundwater strong, we would be able to answer. So you have a lot of expertise in this room. We also have board members from both the Carmel River Watershed as well as the Fire Safe Council. So you've got a lot of expertise in this room. So ask away. Yes, sir.
If you wanted to have catchment, are there restrictions of how big of containers you can have property?
My understanding is that you need to get a permit if it's 5,000 or above. Underneath that, you don't. There are also catchment methods that don't, that are more natural ecosystem elements, like putting in bioswale, which helps direct and sink the water. Putting in a stormwater pond. Beefport Farms has just put in a beautiful stormwater pond, and so they have quite a bit of water stored there. Another way to think of it too, Brock Dolman of the Occidental Arts and Ecology Center, which does a lot of watershed research, coined a phrase, sink it, sink it, spread it, store it. And the idea behind that is it's not simply about putting water in a catchment. It's also about, keeping your groundwater table higher. One of the reasons why riparian corridors are more fire protective and burn with less intensity is because there's more moisture in there. So if you have a healthy riparian corridor with healthy vegetation, healthy native vegetation, and no
decks going out into it, then you have this naturally, it's moisture that decreases intensity of fire. So you want to, in China, they actually call them sponge cities. They try to get greater and greater porosity. So you can put in things like erosion baffles. You can have, when you're doing landscaping, if you put in porous materials rather than straight concrete. I was talking with a wonderful winery, and they were saying, wow, got this problem in the drought, our vineyards dry up so quickly, and in the rainy years, we get a river that just runs right through. But their soil and where they built their tasting room is all, it's a concrete. And so there's no porosity of the soil to bring the water in to be protective in any way, shape, or form. So just thinking about all sorts of ways to retain moisture in your soil. Catchment is one of them, but just one of many. And there are also programs to get free rainwater tanks.
Yeah, we're going to have those. Yes?
Yeah, I guess I always think about, maybe because I'm a pessimist, but I always think about it like we need different policy and that we can't count on individuals. And so I'm just wondering if, for instance, in the county, if there's any energy towards like even having some sort of expo or something of the different strategies that there are to help. I'm familiar with permeable covers for roads and just more desirable options that, people may not be aware of. There's so many, it's just my own social media feed that I've always seen all these alternative materials for building, for roads and things that are more porous or things like that. And I don't think, most of us are aware of those options or would even know, I don't know what's scalable, what's not, what's available. But it seems like, is there any effort? I just wanted to put an effort on a county level to support, even if it's not with the law per se, but some sort of support by exposure, invitation, encouragement, or gardening.
There's state grants.
There are two of those, though. I think that our local experts would be the ones to tell us if are there county-wide programs?
Well, I really mean that's like an
What she's talking
expo,
about.
even an event.
Richard
that
or
they
Pam?
invite people to.
You took it specifically.
Does Cal find it?
Conway County.
Water retention.
For water retention, for increasing permeability.
Oh, okay.
for
I'm sorry. I thought you were
saving
talking
groundwater.
about general fire stuff.
Sort of back to
In
you.
terms of the water, sorry, I misunderstood the question. I thought you were just talking about fire specifically.
Well, I mean, it's related.
We're actually looking at, just like there are Firewise communities, we're actually putting together a program called Riverwise, which is to help people understand and have resources for these things, not only where you can get catchment tanks or what else ever, but also having technical assistance or people who will come to your home and talk about what you can do in your particular neighborhood. So we're working on that, and we're going to be putting that out within the next few months. Depends on how fast we work on it, and we'll move on it together. Yes, in the picture.
What is the difference between Firewise and Riverwise?
Well, Firewise is 100% focused on fire. So why don't you tell them about that?
Yeah, Firewise is on wildfire prevention and education. It's a program started by the National Fire Protection Administration and in California. It's administered by California. And it's a resident-driven program, volunteer to basically join together as a community, find out identify your wildfire vulnerability, and then establish a plan to go about mitigating that with your community.
And Riverwise, if we're still in the formation stage, so who knows, we may change the name. We're in the process of bringing together resources and information and technical assistance so that you can learn about these ways of keeping, your groundwater table safer.
The water management district does have programs for water storage tanks and things like that. They have people, so be checking with they're in the water management districts and boundaries, develop programs and information available to them.
I'm gonna say that a lot louder because you have such a lovely soft voice. But anytime you have questions about the riparian corridor or how to better manage your water, Thomas Christensen of the Water Management District, they'll send out engineers to your property and look it over with you and tell you what you can do and what you shouldn't do and how to manage your property well. And they're great. You just call Thomas and say, I need help with this, and they'll send people out.
You did lay out shower and.
Yeah, they go all over the place. Yeah, super helpful. Super helpful people. And you?
This past weekend at Wildlife Day, I spoke with an organization in San Luis Obispo about the importance of beavers. Yeah, it was a really great conversation. But they made me more aware of how beavers are not only ecosystem builders, but they're super important for water sequestration, and they can completely overhaul a dry environment with a wet environment. I was just wondering if there was any local efforts to raise beavers.
There are, and actually the beavers are the very original slow it, sink it, spread it store, because beaver ponds do a really wonderful job of sinking it down below surface water into groundwater. The weight of the beaver ponds do that. And we actually have a couple different groups that are looking at that. There's one, sorry, is it Ventana or is it Lauren would know, Ventana or Santa Lucia? There's one down that area that's looking at doing a project. There's also property up here off of Kashawa Creek that is in conversation with the beaver program for the state to bring beavers in. So, and then there have been other people who've been talking about how they're just thinking about going over to the Salinas side and opening the back door of their car and saying, "I'll give you a ride." Once upon a time, interestingly enough, at one point the beavers were plentiful here, and then when settlers came in, they slaughtered a whole bunch of them. And the National Wildlife, I'm sorry, I don't remember the department, some national group decided we needed more beavers, and so. And this is hilarious. This was in the talk at California Wildlife Day, the Erica Geis talk. She was showing this old newspaper clipping of them parachuting beavers in. They were dropping beavers by parachute into the forest lands in order to get more beavers in. So California Department of Fish. California Department of Fish. It was a. It's also kind of controversial. There are a lot of people who don't really want beavers in the river. And so the focus is really, up above Los Padres Dam and up away from people. Although, I'd love to see you talk to a beaver and tell it not to move around in the river. That's the way it goes. Yeah.
Also, there's a different approach to this, and it's called the Beaver Dam Alternative. And at the Santa Lucia Conservancy, they've done the whole creek with the Beaver Dam Alternative, which are basically mimicking what a beaver dam is, without the beavers. They're already seeing a lot of change in this one creek up there by just doing that. And so if you have a large parcel of land with watershed, the creek coming through, you can't put these Beaver Dam Alternatives in. There's plenty of information about that. The technology is not complex. It just takes a lot of labor. Put the logs across the creek to spill the water down like a beaver dam.
Did everybody hear that? Fine, yeah.
Also, I just wanted to add that I thought that beaver story was fascinating, and I was taking pictures that day. And so the Beaver Festival, the third annual, is in SLO this Saturday. I thought about shooting down the glass of another commitment, but they were great. And when I went to take her picture, she put a puppet on her hand and everything. She was so fun. But yeah, I shot they had a poster. Just a small one reproduced of this program. And I asked her, I said, they parachuted, and then she goes, well, now they're much nicer about it, and they take the whole little beaver family, they relocate them all together. I'm like, okay, that's
and they're
it's gotta be traumatic. Look at beaver, just be dropped on the plane, So they do it a little more gently now.
So each of the different areas that we talked about today, it's kind of hard to cover these topics in a half an hour because you have to start at the ground level, but at the same time, for example, invasive species, there's so much more information about why it's important to identify where you are in the watershed and what your invasive species are so that you can get rid of them. So, any of these areas, if you want us to dive in a little bit more in terms of, what happens when, for example, if you, one of the very controversial topics that there isn't a solution to is, what about the vegetation in riparian corridors? You look at that beautiful picture of rich vegetation, and to some people, for good reason, they look at that and go, oh my gosh, that's all going to burn, and we're all going to burn up because of that vegetation. And some people will come and tell you, cut it all down. And there's some good thinking behind that because, everything burns, right? That's the phrase, everything burns. At the same time, if you have a healthy riparian corridor without invasive species, it's really important to stop fires from starting because you're holding up the banks, you're keeping the moisture in, you throw a lit match into a wet forest, you're not going to burn as fast as, throwing a lit match into a dry area. So, and one of the things that's really important about that is not simply is also where in the watershed are you? Because as you can see, when you're in the mountains, where there's a lot of water, it's not the same as being up as Pam was always telling me, when you're up in 100-year creek, where you don't see the water running, that's a much more dangerous situation, and there are a lot more, you have to dive in a lot deeper into that particular topic. So we tried to give you an overview and to give you kind of a sense of all the different things that you need to be aware of, and we're going to be putting more resources on our website, and also growing our program on this so that we can dive deeper into it. I would point you to a couple different resources if you want. First of all, again, Thomas Christensen and the Water Management District. They'll come out to your land, and they also have a they call it Watershed Wise classes to teach you how to plant native plants and get rid of the invasive species that are more flammable, and help with that. There's also the Resource Conservation District of Monterey County has a really wonderful, it's like this thick if you really want to dive in. The Resource Conservation District has a stewardship guide, the Carmel River Stewardship Guide, which is just chock full of information. So there's a lot of free and available information out there. Of course, the Fire Safe Council has a lot on their websites. There's a lot out there. What I found in so much of the work I've done is that it's awfully hard to apply all that black and white writing into your actual spot. We did a program, or I was part of the side of a program in Marin County where they gave grants to again provide technical assistance, where someone could come and actually look at your land and your area and tell you about what to do with your particular spot. So that's one of the reasons we wanted to give you a sense of where you are within the watershed, but also hopefully later in this year to give some resources of, here's where you can get tank rebates, and here's where you can have somebody come into your land and help you in particular. So we're trying to grow not only the information that's in black and white on on websites, but also people coming out and talking to you, so that you can have a better sense of what to do on your own land. Yeah.
So I live in a neighborhood that has an HOA, and at our HOA meetings, I've floated the idea that maybe it'd be good for us as a community to think about how to harden ourselves against fires, and hasn't been very well received. I mean, I haven't just.
Do you have a Firewise community?
No, so I'm just wondering if are there speakers who can come out and talk about what they're doing as a Firewise community, and
Right next to
paint
you.
a picture. Here you go.
Yeah, I'll speak on that. I'm Andy, I'm on the board. I take care of a Carmel Valley Ranch and
Yes.
part of the Firewise community. And Richard and Pam, I've gotten to know them the last 8 years or so. And when you talk about wanting to learn more about prevention or how you can do more for your community, the Firewise group is the best. We have seen so much engagement with our community, Country Club Drive where I live, and the resort that I work at. We're over 65% committed to all the 7 HOAs with Firewise. And what I believe that's the biggest benefit, other than the fire prevention, is your neighbors become friends and you work together, and then you work together with other Firewise groups, and it becomes this like it's almost odd when you're not a Firewise group now. And that map a few years ago, there was only 2 or 3 on it, and I'm sure that map should be updated, probably more.
There are 55 in America.
Yeah,
And
so
growing.
kudos to you two for spreading that. It's been
Not every community has an Andy Banasco in it either, so.
I recommend it. You can be a Firewise group.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have not so much a question as an inquiry.
Yeah.
Our weather is really whipsawing. We're going extreme heat to extreme wet. And, part of the challenge is mitigating both of those. And I was in a presentation a few years ago down in Big Sur by a company called Wildfire Water Solutions.
Huh.
And this is a company that moves vast quantities of water. And they had worked on a project, I think it was in the San Antonio River, where they took water from the river only above flood stage and relocated. And it struck me as possibly having some applications in the Carmel River to mitigate the flooding, the mouth of the valley, providing water. And we all have seen recently how critical water is should wildfire get into an urban setting. Where would that process start in terms of determining its feasibility? I mean, I know there are vast and numerous hurdles to something like that, but if one wanted to get that ball rolling.
Well, there are a few different things going on. That's a really great observation. Thank you for bringing it up. And you guys feel free to jump in and correct me because you've been here a lot longer than I have. But the first is that we do have a couple floodplain projects that are starting. So one of them is at the Palo Corona Park, as I'm sure you're aware, the Rancho Cañada. What used to be a golf course is being reclaimed. That they have a 40-acre parcel that's being reclaimed into a floodplain, and that again goes to the slowing it and sinking the water to keep the groundwater high. So if water naturally, a river naturally keeps moving all the time, and when man comes in and tries to control it, we try to make it straight like this, development up against it. And as you point out, then you end up with flooding and things like that. So reclaiming by putting a floodplain in allows it to spread out and sink down in, but also creates that habitat for the steelhead fish and all that sort of stuff to be able. So we have 2 really major transformative projects happening here in the Carmel River. And one is at the Palo Corona. The second is down near Highway 1, and that one is supposed to be reducing the flooding there at the mouth a bit. And that one is the Carmel River Free Project, which is being led by, it's a $57 million or $47 million? $57 million project. It's being led by the Big Sur Land Trust. And it is, they've raised all the money. They've got it through the EIR. They've been working on it for 9-10 years, and it's pretty much ready to go. And I spoke with Rachel, who's in charge of that project, and she said it's just being held up right now in the federal level, and I'm not quite sure in what. She just told me it's being held up right now with
They're cutting off.
various things are going. So we have 2 actually, and I was speaking, and this speaks. This next example speaks to the benefit of what a wonderful this community this is, because I was speaking with the State Coastal Conservancy, and they said, the Carmel River has had more transformative projects like getting rid of the fish passage barrier removals, converting that golf course, taking down the San Clemente Dam, which was a completely innovative thing at the time that happened. And she commented to me that the reason why is because there's so much collaboration between the entities and the communities. And some of that is because people have been coming together for 25 years. The organizations have been coming together, the Carmel River Task Force, and these communities work really, really well together. So I know that our organization is based on that concept of collaboration because no one entity can handle a $57 million floodplain project. But we're also working with, we've been in talks with NOAA, and NOAA has said that one of the biggest problems of keeping the water supply in the river at this point is the unrestrained well use. And that's a big issue because it's a really hot topic. We don't want to stop people from using their water, but at the same time, we need to figure that out as well. So we're trying to figure out how to work with the county and with NOAA to be looking into some of that. I mean, one of those, as Wendy was bringing up, if you look at some of the major water users, such as the schools that are right on the edge of the river that pull water, perhaps we could help them do a project. I did a project up in Sonoma with the RCD up there, where we put catchment and rainwater gardens in schools, and it was so fantastic because not only did you have then all of the ball fields watered from catchment water, it was also a great educational opportunity for the kids to be involved in the project all the way through. So that's high on my list of things that I want to hopefully get some movement on that. So it's all the way through, working from individual landowners, well users, schools, public property areas, and all the way through.
If you wouldn't mind explaining the other is the ASR. I mean, that is such a huge benefit that we can do that and divert water in high flow events. So that also speaks to your questions. If we can divert water and flooding, but we can also capture water in high flow events and store it.
Yes.
That's
What's the ASR?
Aquifer storage and recovery. And so when we get high flows, for reminding me, when you get high flows, then we do lift some water out and put it into the seaside basin.
So we can pump groundwater as it's going at a high, there's X number of cubic feet per second, and it can disperse it back over the hill into the seaside water basin, fill it up, which is amazing. Beyond great. That's like the word forbearance always comes to mind. We can take water in wet periods instead of dry periods. That's sustainability at its finest.
Yeah. And one of the things that, again, fire is not my expertise. I'm more of a water person, but when you see these high impact fires, they talk about, how the wind is, everything's so dry in the wind. So just keeping even the soil moist is a big thing in the reading that I've done. So we just want to keep the water table as high as possible.
Well, and another thing that some other communities have done is actually take the water, the excess water during the rainy season, and inject it into wells. And so instead of just spreading it out on the surface, actually pushing it back down into the groundwater. So there's a lot of different ways that people have explored storing water in the groundwater.
And actually, isn't it? Yeah, Jackson Family Winery has been one of the pioneers in that of doing well injection in the winter. So they just turn their well operations upside down in the winter and inject it in. But I don't think I haven't heard. I brought it up a number of times here, and everybody's like, what? So we have to try to spread that idea out there.
There are definitely issues. I mean, obviously, we don't want to be contaminating your groundwater. You don't want to take contaminated surface water and pump it down to the groundwater. So there's a lot of different things to think about. But like in Sonoma County, they actually take, water from their drinking water pipeline that they're exporting to Marin, and they have excess water, they inject it into wells and store it in the groundwater, and then later, when there's a drought, they use the exact same well to pull that water back out and use it.
And those of you, I don't know if you guys were all here at the desal last conversation last month, but Sarah Hargrave was talking about how the seawater intrusion is such a big issue in the Salinas Basin because the water's been being sucked out for so many years, and that by putting in some desalination along the edge, they can actually help drive that back out. So there's some good people looking at lots of good ways to do this. Anything else? Yes?
Do you happen to know if there's any of the ASR projects in Carmel Valley? I know that they take water from the Seaside Basin, but I was wondering if anything was actually happening in the valley. Geology's a bit different.
It's managed through air and water. So their produced domestic wells are using the Carmel River watershed aquifer and discharging it to the Seaside Basin.
But yeah,
But that's because
I wonder if they're doing it, if any of the geology in the valley here would support that.
yeah. My understanding is that our aquifer is so much more shallow.
Yeah.
That's why we take it over to the Seaside Basin. I have been talking with Jake over at the Parks District, and they've been looking at some of the paleo valleys in the area. You guys, and if we find and connect up paleo valleys that we could recharge those. He was showing me one that he thought was coming down from the Salinas Mountains down through the mouth. But I have to.
Can you,
It's really interesting.
what do you mean by Salinas Mountains? I think of the Santa Lucia and the Gatlin. So what is the Salinas Mountains?
So I was just calling the range between the Carmel Valley and Salinas.
Yeah, right here it's called the Sierra de Salinas.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
We've got more of these if you guys want to take them.
If there's a better name,
Well, is it so it's not temporal rain?
Yeah. That's the Sierra de Salinas. We're in between the two. Our special valley. Any other questions or, tell us, as you can tell, this is the first time we've done this particular bit of information. And as you can tell, we've kind of had a challenge figuring out where to dive deep and where you've heard it all before. You know, like I'm sort of like, we want to have home hardening in there, but I think you guys have heard that all before, right? So could you give us some feedback as you're leaving or whatever, come up and tell us, gosh, I'd really like to have heard more about this or whatever. That would be super helpful to us.
or email in too.
Or email in.
Yeah.
We have a sheet here to pass around. It will, you can sign up so that you hear about our next Science Uncorked. Our next one is going to be on the Los Padres Dam. And there's the second Thursday of every month. So I'm not sure what's the date of that is. May 8th. They'll be here May 8th on the Los Padres Dam, the future of Los Padres Dam. We have, there are a couple different studies going on about the future. One is a culture study and the other is just the basic engineering stuff. So we'll have water management talking about the engineering. We'll have the guy leading the culture study coming in and talking about that. So we'll have those two pieces of information.
Right.
Anything else for today? Yeah.
You mentioned, I think someone probably asked me about this and I couldn't hear, but you mentioned about the water catchment tanks and the possibility of some rebates for that.
Yes.
And I'm left with this vague sense that it's possible. I have no idea where to go look.
Yeah. At the moment, look, go talk with the water management district
Okay.
under their watershed wise program. And then as we put together our
resources. We'll have some more resources on our website sometime soon. So. Wonderful. Well, thank you for joining us tonight and being our guinea pigs for the first time we're talking about this topic. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for organizing.
Yeah.
But I'm Hopefully, I mean, I'm
Depends on how you're situated. If you're facing this way, I mean, if you're facing that way, you're about.
So it's not, I thought.
Where's Route 68?
But also the big
Oh, yeah, I'm trying to figure out. You know, I keep saying, the safety tree and after, what are they found in?
And on this side, it's this side, it's
So I guess you're
got another one. Got one.